Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Welcome to the Big Life Podcast. I'm Neal Oates Jr. and as always, I'm joined by the incredible Mr. Robin Lewis. Robin, it's great to be here with you today, sir.
Man, Neal, good to see you. Good to be here with you and with our listeners today. I'm especially looking forward to today's conversation, Neal. We're tackling something that I think every person pursuing a purpose-driven life, so all of our listeners, will face at some point. Today, folks, we're going to be talking about invisible progress. We're going to be talking about how to keep believing and working when it feels like nothing is moving.
Robin, first of all, for all of our audience and our listeners, this is something that is hitting me as we record this episode. And gratefully, thankfully, and fortunately, I have Robin here in my life to remind me that progress is happening, even if I can't see it. And this topic is important because we live in a results-focused world. And oftentimes we measure success by what's visible, by what I can see in front of me, like followers, revenue, or promotions, or maybe even accolades and the awards that we have on our shelves. But the most significant transformations often happen in the hidden spaces of our lives.
Amen. And so true. And today we want to encourage the person who feels stuck or unseen or unforgotten. And Neal, I appreciate your heart in sharing that. The truth is that I've been there. The truth is all of our listeners, they've either been there or they're going to be there at some point in time. So I appreciate your heart in sharing that. And then also the idea is for us to encourage each other. So we're here to remind you that just because it's invisible doesn't mean that it's insignificant. That's what we want you to hear today.
And without a friend, before we go any further, I'm just going to encourage everyone, find you a partner in life that will remind you of the significance of the invisible, right? Of the things that we can't see. Because ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, in this episode, I want you to know that I am speaking to myself, and I am grateful to have my brother Robin Lewis here to encourage me, to remind me of what is significant even in those invisible moments. So Robin, I think that we should first look at the nature of invisible progress. So that's a great place to start. And why does progress sometimes stay hidden? Why don't we always see immediate results from our efforts, Robin?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think the reality is because it's about growth, and growth is a process. We don't grow overnight. It's not just all of a sudden and boom, we're there. Just like a seed in the ground, transformation starts beneath the surface. Roots must develop before the plant can actually break through the soil. And if the roots aren't strong, the growth won't last.
Robin, my wife and I, we have right in the window over here, we have one of those hydroponic machines, right, where we can grow our tomatoes and cilantro and cucumbers and everything inside.
I was going to say, run that word by me again, sir.
No, the hydroponic, so it is the water system, right? So it grows with the water instead of the soil.
Nice.
But I can see into the tank. And what you just mentioned is talking about those roots. And I always see the roots form going down so that they can get the nutrients before the sprout ever comes through the soil. And so that is something that I have to be reminded. And I love that metaphor because it's true in every part of life. There's not a part of life that's meaningful that does not apply to. So whether it's business, relationships, faith, or even health, that is applicable. The roots are invisible, but they are essential. And it's a reminder for me that if all we see is the outward result without a foundation underneath, it can collapse under pressure or it can wither once that sun hits it.
Yeah, that's so true. And by the way, this message, I feel like our listeners are going to feel it today. And I want our listeners to feel it today. And sometimes invisible progress, is God's way of protecting us.
Hey, Robin, stop it, sir. I would be like, God, don't protect me so much. Come on, give me visible progress.
Right?
I apologize, Robin. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, it's true. I get it. Our listeners get it. I'm there too, right? But here's the point. We might want a public platform, or we might want greater influence. But if our character or capacity hasn't caught up yet, it can crush us. So we actually do want that type of protection. And so he builds us in private first.
And I just do want to say that that's a profound point. One, because now it's not about Neal, it's not about Robin, it's not about our feelings, but knowing that God, our Papa, Abba Father, is protecting us. And the hidden seasons are not punishment. And I think that's key for me, because I start thinking, well, what did I do wrong? Why don't I? And we'll talk about that comparison a little bit later. But why aren't I seeing? Maybe there's a flaw. Maybe I need to repent or get something right. But it's not punishment. Oftentimes, those hidden seasons are preparation, Robin.
Yes, so true. Exactly. And a lot of times, you and I were talking about this before coming on the show. A lot of times, we actually don't see that until looking back. And so, but let's talk about the emotional weight of invisible progress. It's one thing to understand the process on an intellectual vantage point, but it's another to actually live through it, right? It can feel discouraging. It can even feel devastating sometimes. Sometimes I've found myself like wondering why, like almost moved to tears. Right? Right, Neal?
So absolutely. And what I found, Robin, is that one of the biggest challenges is the feeling of stagnation, right? Just being stuck. We're working, we're praying, we're giving our best, but nothing seems to be changing on the outside externally. And if we're honest, that's where discouragement starts to set in.
I agree. Another part of it is isolation, right? When your progress is invisible, it feels like no one sees your effort, no one understands your struggle, right? People might assume that you're either idle or uncommitted when you're actually working your butt off and you're working harder than ever, and nobody's actually seeing it, and you can feel isolated.
And I do want to pause here for a moment. And you've mentioned the feeling, right? The feeling of isolation. And I think that's key, because just because we feel that way or we feel discouragement does not mean that it is the truth. Right. The truth is that it could be God protecting us, that it could be God preparing us, but we might feel a different way. And I think it's so important for us as believers to really know what the truth is and to remember that. And if you can't remember, make sure you have someone in your corner to remind you of what the truth is. So after we look at, combating this discouragement or isolation, then there's this ugly thing that many of us can fall into, that Neal has been guilty of very recently, and that's comparison, ladies and gentlemen. We live in an age where people broadcast their highlights daily, right, by the second. And if you're in a hidden season, it's easy to believe that we're behind, right? That we're failing because our journey looks different, because we don't have those highlights. We don't have that B-roll that others have, where they're walking on clouds and, there's nothing but rainbows, but never any rain, Robin.
Exactly, brother. And I'm so glad, if we said nothing else for our listeners today than what you just said, I believe that we've added value to them today. Because here's the truth. Progress isn't always loud. Some of the most life-changing work that God does in us happens in silence, and it happens in solitude. That's where some of the most life-changing work actually happens.
But Robin, this is where, if you are like me, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes that silence and solitude can be scary, it can be frightening, it can be uncomfortable, and we don't want to be there. I told Robin, I don't want to be here. And as the song says, I know this is good, but it doesn't feel good. And Robin was like, hey, brother, you're right where you need to be. And I'm like, ooh, I wish there was a better answer. Now, that's the truth. It doesn't feel good, but I know that it is good. So I want to jump into some stories and examples as we often do, Robin. We've already done this in this episode, but we often lead by example. So I'm just curious, can you think of a time when you were going through a season of invisible progress and it felt like nothing was moving? But looking back now, you realize how significant that time was?
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind is kind of funny, Neil. You're probably not even going to believe this, but one of the things in our acronym in the big life is believe in yourself, right? I now have changed that to believe boldly, to sort of remember who you are. And I was sharing this with somebody just recently in my office where I am right now as we record this. I remember coming off of a call where we had it was a mentor call and a group call with some mentors. And I don't remember exactly what was taught, Neil. Here's the point. I had this sense after coming off the phone, and to me and you, I know it was God. And to our listeners who might not be people of faith, whatever that is to you, the universe, there's some higher order here. There's no doubt in my mind that higher order, God, was speaking to me. And what he said to me was, I believe in you. And I really do mean you. And the reason that I share that one as the example, Neil, is because for many years, I struggled with doubt and with self-doubt, and I had a low self-image. I've shared some of the stories here on this show, and there's a whole lot more to share, and I won't bore our listeners with that today, or today is not the right time, I should say. It might not be boring, but here's the point, that I have struggled with that for years, to where even in the last few years, I still recognize that. You remember the time I was sharing with you that I was on the trip to Jamaica, and how I was, in my driving, I was doubting myself and doubting my ability. So and that's not that long ago, Neil. I realized that still showed up. This is Robin now, Neil. Now, folks, Neil probably knows this better than you do. But I've been, like in this personal growth and development, reading, attending seminars, I've been, trying to deal with that self-doubt and limiting belief in some cases and so on for years.
Mm-hmm. And
then I realized just a few years ago, I still struggle with it. But Neil, you know something? I didn't share this with you, and I'm going to stop with this. But folks, this was just a few months, this was late last year. I found myself at somebody's birthday party, a 70th birthday party. And Neil, I was out there on the dance floor, getting down all by myself, no alcohol, by the way. It's not like I didn't know what I was doing. And Neil, I didn't care about what others thought. Yeah. I remember saying to myself, wow, Rob, you've actually come a long way. Because it might not seem like a big thing. But for me to be out there not caring about what I might look like, doing my thing out there on the dance floor and all that kind of stuff, what it meant to me is that all that stuff has helped me to get to that place where I'm comfortable in my own skin, where I believe in myself. And so, sorry for the long answer, sir, but that's what comes to my mind.
Not so that is not a long answer. And in fact, it's powerful. And I love the fact that when we share and when we're being vulnerable, it really helps our audience. It helps even your co-host, your brother here, open my eyes. And so for me, the idea or the time that I think about when I felt like I was working and nothing was happening in the background, when I'm just being forgotten about, it was early in my coaching business, right? So I've been great at real estate, and I'm like, hey, I want to do this. I believe that there was a calling on my life. And I'm thinking, Robin, if there's a calling, then it's got to be easy. Right, you called me to do this. I'm good over here selling real estate, right? Don't call me over here and then make it a struggle like that. That's just rude. So there were seasons where it felt like no one was paying attention to me in my coaching business, where I've committed to doing this thing, to following God's way and listening to his word and knowing that it was his voice to call me this way, away from lucrative real estate transactions where I spent all my time. But engagement was low, clients were scarce. But those years were when I honed my message, refined my systems, and built credibility with a small but loyal audience. And so now, even as recently as a few days ago, people say, Neal, You came out of nowhere. You were overnight success. Oh my gosh, you were amazing. We've never heard of you, just out of the blue. I laugh because I know the years that were invisible to others. I know that we've shared this a lot. When I'm feeling those, or when I do experience the triumph, I'm like, Robin, can you believe the nerve of these people to say I came from nowhere, that I'm an overnight success? And you're like, Neal, they didn't know. You were working behind the scenes. You were invisible.
Yeah, it's so true. And I have seen that. And that's just in the last few years, Neil. That I know that started before. Just from the first day that you and I met, right? I already knew that you were a growth-minded individual, right? That you were, and I remember you talking about all the books that you've read. I mean, I found somebody that I think has read more books than me, and I'm like, whoa, and you're actually living it. And so, yeah, clearly, there's no such thing as an overnight success. And congratulations to you, sir, on where you are today. The truth is, what looks sudden is usually the result of years of unseen work, years of doing it over and over and over and over and over again.
So, Robin, I would like for us to transition here quickly, because I do want to encourage our listeners now, right? We want to just point out some signs that invisible progress is happening, because if we leave it to our own devices, if we leave it to our own mind, we look around and say, well, nothing's happening, might as well pack it up and go home. And we want to encourage you with this. Just because your progress isn't visible doesn't mean there's none. And that's very important. Just because it isn't visible doesn't mean that there's no progress happening. And so I want to know, as someone who has been on both ends, Robin, I'm making this assumption, but I also know this to be true for you. For someone who's been on both ends, who has had visible progress, but then also invisible progress, what are some subtle signs that growth is happening beneath the surface for our audience as they find themselves in this process?
That's such a good question. I think one thing is increased resilience. I think things that used to break you or keep you down a little bit longer, now maybe it shakes you a little bit, or maybe if it knocks you down, you don't stay down as long. You might still face challenges, but because of the growth, you recover faster. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I don't like that you started with that one, Robin, because I sit here sometimes. And so you say that is a subtle sign that growth is happening, right? But then also there's frustration in that growth. Because before, it would wipe us out and we would have permission, if it knocks us out, to go a different route. But now we're like, oh, yes, it hurt, but it didn't kill me. I believe I could still keep moving forward. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as Robin says, that increased resilience, you have what it takes to persevere. Another subtle sign, Robin, I believe, is clarity. And even if the results aren't visible yet, you start to feel clearer about your mission, your values, and the direction you're supposed to go. So we're not seeing any big results, but there is this quietness, this stillness, this clarity on the inside that says, all right, I can see clearly now, right? And I don't see the results, but I didn't quit, and I have clarity in my direction.
I love it. I love it. I heard somebody say the other day, the more steps you take towards your vision, is the clearer your vision gets. And that's so true, man. I love that.
Robin, you would see, that's what makes me wonder and second guess our friendship and our relationship, because you get excited about stuff like that and you're like, yes, just hold on a little bit longer, just fight a little bit more. And I'm like, Robin, can't we give up yet? And you're like, no, not yet. You can give up, just not today.
Yes,
and then
sir.
tomorrow
Not
you'll
today.
tell me the same thing.
There you go. Amen. And Neal, I appreciate your transparency today. And our listeners, I'm sure would all agree, we've all been there. And so you're being transparent with the way you are today. But the reality is that all of us experience this at some point in time. All of us do. And if you haven't yet, you just hold on.
Hey, thanks for the encouragement, Robin. Hey, if you haven't felt bad yet on your journey, just hold on. It's coming.
Hold on and mark the number of this episode so you can come back to it if and when you do. Okay, that's for somebody today. I know somebody listening is going to mark it down for when they are there. But Neal, this is good stuff. A third sign, I think, of this subtle growth is that is emotional regulation, if you will. You notice that maybe you're a little bit less reactive, you're a little bit less anxious, you're developing maturity, you're growing, and even if the circumstances haven't changed, how you show up in those circumstances changes, and you start to notice that.
And then what I'm going to say, once we become better regulators of our emotions, because we know that feelings can do a lot, then that, I believe, if we add all those together, we get to this place of consistency, right? The fact that you're still showing up, still working, still believing, that's invisible progress.
Yes.
So for that person who is there right now, you're still here. You're still tuning into the Big Life podcast. You're still waking up. You're still getting dressed and going out. That's invisible progress. Consistency in the unseen seasons lays the groundwork for visible harvest. Robin mentioned planting that seed early on. If the seed is never planted, if there's no fallow season, there's no harvest. And so just be encouraged with that. What do you got for us, Robin?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's worthy of being repeated. I think what I heard you say is consistency, even when you don't see it visibly, is actually what brings about what you want to see visibly.
Absolutely,
and so that's
100%.
So powerful. So if we could, why don't we just talk from a more of a strategy vantage point now, as we move through this invisible progress. Let's give our listeners some practical tools for navigating invisible progress. So when you find yourself acknowledging that you're a little bit frustrated, you're a little bit discouraged, you're putting in all this hard work and you're not seeing the results, right? Neal, let's start with you. What's one thing that you would suggest that our listeners do?
You and I, we live and die by this thing right here. Now, this is not the Bible, but this is a journal, right? So for me, it's keep a journal of faithfulness. And you do not have to be a person of faith. You don't have to be a Christian, but keep a journal of faithfulness. Instead of focusing only on outcomes, record your daily actions, insights, and moments of growth. We had this conversation before we came on air. Looking back on the entries in my journal here, Robin, it reminds me of how far I've come, especially when the results aren't obvious, when I'm not seeing it right now, here today. I go back, and us being men of faith, we know that's why God commanded the people to have pillars and to come back and have altars so they could look back and see when he was faithful, what he brought them through. And so now for us today, that faithfulness journal, a journal of faithfulness, might be where we can look back and look at and see some of those victories and wins as a result of invisible progress.
Yes, and that is so good. That is so good. I think in our society, I know for myself, a lot of times I don't want to sort of big myself up, if you understand that kind of lingo there, right? But I don't want to record the good stuff that I have done. I don't want to, take note of the growth that I am experiencing, because it seems like I'm focusing on myself, maybe I feel overconfident. But the reality is, as we do those, it increases our confidence. There's no question about it. So that's a good one to start. Another strategy, and it's kind of similar, is to create small, measurable wins. So don't always be going after the big stuff. If the big goals might feel like we're not making any progress towards them sometimes, right? Because they're big and they're out there. And so we want to set smaller goals that we can accomplish on a weekly or a monthly basis that build momentum, right? I'm trying to lose weight. I don't mind putting it out there into this world. I keep myself accountable. The next time somebody sees me, the next time you see me, Neal, you can ask me about it, right? But what I'm started to do now is I'm measuring myself once a week. I'm weighing myself, not measuring. I'm weighing myself once a week. And that I can check off a win. The other day I lost a pound in a week, and I'm like, yay! And that builds momentum and it keeps hope alive. And if you'd allow me again to indulge just a little bit, I just saw this just recently here. My experience this. My grandson Jalen, he is starting to crawl now, and I was on FaceTime with my daughter and him, and she wanted to show me. And so she she had put something over here and said, come over here, Jalen, come get it. And she's showing me on the thing. And he was a little bit hesitant and he was getting distracted. Neal, I think he made 2 crawls. He made 2, and his grandpa was, yay, Jalen, woohoo! And I was singing his praises. And the truth is that this is an example. That's a small win, but if we can celebrate those small wins, we're making progress. It's keeping hope alive. You can do it, Jalen. Come on, you're a winner. Come on.
So let me jump in here, and I want to ask you a follow-up question to that, Robin. Where and when does that die in us as achievers, as adults, as grown-ups, right? Where do we forget that the small win is to be celebrated, right?
Yeah.
That 2 crawls. And so Jalen's crawling, and he doesn't have the weight on us that we have with responsibility. But yet and still, we don't celebrate our 200 steps. It like where does that forgetfulness or that unwillingness or whatever it is, where do you think that happens, that we forget? Because you're telling us to remember to celebrate, reminding us to celebrate. Why are we here?
I mean, I think there's some of the things that we are talking about right here today, like we need to be reminded to celebrate the small wins. So I don't think this is a personalized thing. I think any of us, that if the focus is only on the big goal, the big goal is not going to happen overnight. And so the way that we keep hope alive is measuring the small wins. And I think that's what we're talking about, Neal. What you said, record your actions, your faithfulness. Where are you being faithful? Record those things. I think that it ties in. We didn't talk about it specifically today, but it ties in. And that's this idea of gratitude. What are you thankful for? The more that we think about the good that's happening in our life, is the more hope we have. It's the more, right? So I think we're talking about the very things, man. And I agree with you. It's very easy for all of us, don't care what age we are, to get. And I think sometimes, maybe as we grow older, maybe we get a little bit more cynical, and, maybe it's easier for us to get discouraged and maybe even sometimes even give up. Right.
And so this is where I'm going to add to where you just ended, Robin. As we become more mature, as we maybe become more cynical or are on the verge of giving up because we aren't seeing the progress or experiencing it firsthand. I know in my life, I would say this one has made the biggest difference most recently, and that's stay connected to people who can see your progress when you can't. Right. So we say we can't see the forest for the trees, but stay connected to people who can see your progress when you can't. We all need mirrors in our lives. And I know we might have a hate relationship with the mirror, right? Like, oh, I want to see how I look, but I don't want it to show my flaws, right? But that's not always what the mirror does. Sometimes that mirror reminds you, hey, you're pretty darn cute. You've got it put together. You are better than your mind tells you that you are. Yeah. And so the mirrors that we need are those people who remind us of our growth, our worth, and our impact. I can tell you that whether it's you, Robin, or my mom, my wife, some of my best friends, they're like, Neal, you're doing a heck of a job. And I'm like, why did you say that? Simply because my brother and I had a conversation that without your name coming up, we never would have had this conversation that went deeper than any conversation we've had in a couple of months. Or because your willingness to be silly and to lighten the mood and to let people know that you can be authentic and open up and be vulnerable. And I'm like, really? Like, that's just normal. That doesn't count as impact. That's not more money. That's not a bigger stage. That's not more clientele or a new deal, but that impact, that worth and growth. Having someone in your corner that can remind you of that stuff, that's the priceless stuff for me lately.
Amen. Right on. And a lot of times those things do lead to the visible that you're talking about, by the way. Another one that I think is good for us to be reminded of,
Robin, if you're going where I think you're going, because based on our pre-show conversation, I think there's one that's left. And if you're going where I think you're going, this is the one where I might screw my face up at you just a little bit, because it's going to hit me pretty hard.
And so we all have to be reminded of it, to limit our comparison triggers. It's so easy, like we're surrounded by everybody's just doing so well today. And everybody, because everybody only shows the good stuff, and so sometimes we can get caught in this trap. And actually, something I say it in sort of a humorous way, but I've heard that actually that's one of the things that leads to the younger generation being
Yep.
depressed.
Yes, sir.
It's actually causing havoc because we feel inadequate. We feel like those around us are doing so much better, and they're so much better than we are, and they're doing things that like we aren't and we can't, and they just look so much better, right? And we have to be aware that that's out there, and it's just a piece of the story that we're trying to make ourselves look good.
Hmm.
And so we have to protect our focus. We have to protect what we are. So you know what that means in some cases? That means to unfollow some accounts, right? Some of the people on social media that we follow, we need to unfollow them. And we need to put our focus on our mental health. And invisible progress requires a clear mind. It requires for us to be thinking straight. And so we need to limit our comparison triggers. I won't stay there very long, sir.
Nah, so okay, so now I can exhale. And we're going to make one final pivot, Robin, because of our beliefs and what I would call our foundation. I want to know from a spiritual perspective, why do you think God, right? Because we're so quick to assign responsibility or blame to God, right? Depending on how we're feeling. Why do you think God sometimes keeps progress hidden for a season? Not forever, but for a season, because he does say in his word that for everything there is a season. So why do you think that sometimes God keeps progress hidden for a season?
So, I actually heard somebody say this, that if we only trusted God when everything was successful, when everything was going well, everything was visible, we could see the progress and so on, then it wouldn't be faith. Faith is when we don't see, it's
Yeah.
believing. Believing when we don't see. If we're relying only on what we're seeing, then it's just sight. It's just what we're seeing. And so I believe that God grows us in private so that when the visible season comes, our foundation is strong, that we can carry the weight. That's the part that, Neil, I think we don't really get to see until we look back. That's the part, for example, where I can talk to somebody today about believing boldly because I have come through that. And because I've come through some times where I still wondered, why do you still worry so much about what you still concerned about what other people think? And this is after years. You know why? Because I've gotten to that place now where I can represent that now with authenticity.
Yeah. And so Robin, that's a big deal. In audience, I want to remind you that the hidden seasons refine our motives, right? They take us through this period of time where we're going to be tested, and they're going to test whether we're pursuing the dream for applause, right? Because we want the attention, or because we're truly called to it. And I mentioned earlier my coaching business versus my real estate. And was I being called to it, or did I want to do this so I could be on stage and to get the applause? But when we emerge, we're not just successful. When we come out of those hidden places, we're not just successful, we're whole. And I think that now, especially in 2025, when we're recording this, having a whole spirit, being a whole person is something that if we could experience that spiritual wholeness, I believe that everything else changes.
Wow, that's so good. That's so true and so good. I think the hidden seasons also protect us from premature exposure. God knows when we're ready. And when the timing is right, what's been growing invisibly will burst into visible fruit. It's funny, Neil and I were kind of talking about this before, of some things that are happening in his life now that I just really believe that he's coming into a season where it's going to burst into visible fruit. But I think, that's kind of how it works. So it's good for us to recognize this is just a part of the visible coming, right?
Yeah.
And when the timing is right, boom, there comes the growth.
And that's what I am waiting for. I say I'm waiting for it, but that's what I'm working in as we know it is coming. So
Amen.
this has been an absolute treat and a blessing for me. And so I want to say to anyone who feels stuck or unseen, we want you to know, Robin and I want you to know that invisible progress is still progress, right? You are growing even if you can't see it yet. You will see it.
Amen. Yes, I agree. I second that notion. You're not behind. You're not failing. Right? You're becoming. You are becoming. I wish you could turn that around and you say, if you're driving right now, you say, I am becoming. Right, Neil? I
Absolutely.
am becoming. So don't mistake quiet seasons or seasons where it just doesn't look like things are happening. Don't mistake that for wasted time, because God doesn't waste anything.
And so it's kind of hard to argue with you, Robin, especially when you remind us of the truth, right? And so arguing with the truth will be futile. And so we want you to remember this: seeds don't look like trees. Your current reality may not resemble your future harvest, but that doesn't mean it's not on the way.
Ooh, that was gold.
That was gold. That was good right there, Robin.
That was good right there, sir. Thank you for sharing that. And so here's our challenge for you this week, to our listeners, as we kind of wrap this one up. We want you to identify 3 areas where you have grown in the past year, even if no one else has seen it. And Neil talked about record your faithfulness, right? We want you to identify 3 areas where you have grown in the past year, even if no one else knows it. And we want you to write them down. We want you to thank God for them, because that's your invisible progress.
And Robin, we do know that they don't have to look far to find some victories, to find some invisible progress. Robin is being lenient and saying, go back and look for a year. Another ask that Robin and I have for you: if you're finding value in the Big Life podcast, in this episode specifically, we ask that you share this episode with someone who might be feeling unseen. Remind them that they are right on time and that the invisible progress is often the most profound type of progress.
Right on. Thank you for spending time with us today. We're honored actually to walk alongside you as you build your big life. We believe in you. That's why we do what we do. And even in the seasons where your progress can't be seen, and especially in those seasons, we're right there with you.
Absolutely. So we want to ask you to subscribe, leave a comment, let Robin and I know what's on your mind. Maybe if you're feeling that you are in a season of invisible progress, what you might think of as invisible non-progress, don't give up. We would love to hear from you. We would love to encourage you. And we want to remind you that what's hidden today will be the testimony tomorrow. So keep trusting the invisible prop. We love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're right there with you. Peace.
Peace.